As we begin our service, I invite you to silence your phone, close other windows in your computer, take a deep breath, and center yourself for worship. We open in welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that this church, like Olive Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land, who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawamoic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice.
Hi guys, welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Rencale, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm very excited to be your worship associate today. If you are new to Accotink, look around. Do you see people you haven't met or haven't spoken to in a while? These people like you and want to meet you. Help us live up to our mission to be a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home for all by reaching out and making a connection. By visiting this congregation, newcomers are in a transition moment, and people in transitions are open to new friendships. That means that your new best friend could be sitting in this room right now, so you want to get to them before other people can. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or somewhere in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour online or in person immediately after the service. I'm very excited that you decided to join us today. Welcome. Our minister, Reverend William Levewood, affectionately known as Rev Lev, is here most Sundays. Today, our guest pulpit is Emily Parker, a lifelong UU with a passion for building intergenerational justice-seeking communities for the next generation. During college, Emily led a campus ministry and conducted research on trends among UU emerging adults. How We Really Bridge presented in 2018 a UUA General Assembly. More recently, she completed her internship at the UU Congregation of Frederick, Maryland, and completed her Clinical Pastoral Education at the Clinical Center at the NIH. Emily holds the M.Div with a specialization in Public Theology from Wesley Theological Seminary. Emily currently serves UU FaithAction New Jersey as Communications Director and is a candidate for UU ministry.
Nice to meet you all. And as we light our chalice together now, please rise in body or in spirit, and we will recite the words up on the screen from our shared UU values. Love is at the center of Unitarian Universalism. Love is the practice of our living tradition. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to help everyone flourish, honor the web of life, be beloved community, cultivate generosity, celebrate diversity, and transform the world with love.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Michelle Anderson, and I am just so excited to be your Children and Youth Spiritual Development Director. And today I have a story for you. This is a story of how a boy found out that his Unitarian Universalist grandmother and grandfather were heroes. As an 8th grader in New York City, a boy named Artemis Jakowski III chose his grandmother to interview for a school assignment. His grandmother was named Martha Sharp. This worked yesterday. Telling his grandparents' story is a way to pass along the question that Martha Sharp posed to Artemis throughout his life. What are you going to do that is important in your life? On a snowy night in Prague in 1939, Martha Sharp jumped from a taxi, dashed around a corner, and flattened herself into a doorway. The heels of a pursuing Gestapo agent clicked past her. She entered into an unlit apartment building, dashed up 5 flights of stairs, and rang the bell, ding dong, of a known anti-Nazi leader. I have any helpers that want to help me keep them up there, that would be great. But 6 weeks earlier, Martha and her husband, the Reverend Wakefield Sharp, had left their young children safely in the United States so they could volunteer for a relief effort in Czechoslovakia, sponsored by the American Unitarian Association. Then, one night in 1939, the Nazi army marched into Prague. Everybody marched into it, right? The capital of Czechoslovakia, and occupied the city. The helping mission of the Sharps instantly changed into a treacherous cloak and dagger mission. That March night, the woman that opened the apartment door to Martha denied she had ever heard of the man Martha was asking for. I begged, Martha recounted the story later to a biographer. I told her there was little time. I produced my American passport. When she saw it, she said in Czech, and then snatched my passport from me and shut the door in my face. For the next few minutes, Martha frantically worried whether she'd see her passport again. That one's not working? Okay. All right, thank you. Her passport was her only ticket to safety. But the door did open, and a man stood before her. Martha asked if he was Mr. X, as Martha later referred to him when she told the story. He said he could give Mr. X a message. She explained that she had been charged by a group of British and American refugee workers with transporting him to the British embassy so he could be smuggled from the country. The man asked her to wait a moment, then disappeared into the apartment. He opened the door again, wearing an overcoat. He handed Martha her passport and said, "I am Mr. X." Together, they walked through wind and snow across the city. A Nazi soldier stopped them when they reached a bridge over the Volta River. Martha produced her passport and confidently announced, "Americans." Woo!
Okay.
Are you okay? All right.
It didn't even hold.
All right, you want to just hold that there? That's probably a better idea. Yep. Martha goes up with Mr. X. That's a great idea. Thank you. Improvisation.
Give us a second.
All right, so they were waved across the bridge, then stopped by another soldier on the other side, when the passport trick worked again. Just steps outside the British embassy, a third Gestapo officer stopped them. Martha began to loudly complain about the lack of taxis and her frustration of being late for a meeting with the embassy secretary. She flashed her passport and demanded the guard tell the secretary, "Mr. and Mrs. Sharp are here." He waved them ahead to speak with the British guard, and Martha and Mr. X walked into the embassy to safety. Martha then returned to her apartment, where Waitstill was waiting and returning from a similar mission. They watched out their window as Nazi soldiers looted Prague stores and warehouses. The rescue of Mr. X is one of the hundreds that the couple orchestrated, helping Jews and non-Jews, intellectuals, political leaders, writers, artists, and children flee to safety from the Nazis. Yet the heroism of Martha and Waitstill Sharp is still beginning to be recognized. The story of the Sharps' courage illuminates some of the dilemmas that perplex people who care about social justice. How many of us want to help, but are afraid or don't know how? Taking a courageous stand does not require sacrifices and heroics on the scales of the Sharps. It is easy to feel small in comparison to Waitstill and Martha Sharp, says the Reverend Dr. William F. Schultz. Not every one of us can set out for war-torn Europe, but every one of us can help those who do. In sharing his grandparents' experience, Artemis Tchaikovsky wanted their story to inspire others, not overwhelm them. Life is made of righteous moments, not grandiose ones, he says, making choices where you reflect on how you treat everyone in your life. The key part about my grandparents wasn't just one big moment. They made thousands of little choices that led up to the story we now tell. Telling his grandparents' story is a way to pass along to you, a new generation, the question that Martha Sharp asked. What are you going to do that is important in your life? Thank you. Thanks to my helpers.
If you missed the beginning of that story because of audio issues, it's available on the UUA website under the Tapestry of Faith curriculum. You can search for the name of the authors and find it there. Please remain seated as we sing our children to their spiritual development classes. Words for our recessional can be found on the slide. We'll sing it once through. In the hour before my grandfather's memorial service, my family was milling about the sanctuary of First Unitarian Church of Rochester, and I, myself, was inevitably going into full-blown intern minister mode. Really scurrying, more so than milling, testing the microphone, commissioning my girlfriend to hand out hymnals, and trying to recruit cousins to light the chalice. I asked my youngest cousin first. "Sure, probably," she replied. "What does the chalice mean?" Which, for the record, is the right question to ask when you're invited to perform an unfamiliar religious ritual. Right, Yeah, so the flaming chalice actually started as a two-dimensional symbol, like our logo. These Unitarians in Europe, it's actually kind of punk. These Unitarians, they just needed something official looking to stamp papers that they were giving to people to help them escape the Nazis. Then at some point it became this 3D, embodied, living ritual that we do in our services. There's tons of symbolism attached to it, like fire, lighting things, extinguishing things, cup, chalice, water. But, you know, UUs have written about all of it, but no one's really the authority on what it means, so there is no official meaning. The clock was ticking in that moment, and so what Tara got was my short answer. What you all are getting today, because you have indulged me with your pulpit, is the answer I'd have liked to give. As Ren mentioned in her introduction, I grew up a UU kid. And as a kid, to me, the flaming chalice meant the coveted role of lighting the chalice at the beginning of your RE class. I mean, what kid doesn't love playing with fire? And it meant knowing this little light of mine like it was the theme song for a PBS cartoon. As a youth in high school, I was taken with the uniquely sensory, circular, peer-led worship of youth conferences. And in that space, the chalice took on a more spiritual meaning for me. A typical evening worship at those conferences included spiraling into a dark chapel, all singing a simple round, much like the round we just sang. Different bars of the melody naturally overlapping as the long line of teenagers weaved and passed. We sat in a circle, all facing the chalice. Candlelight danced on the walls. And the way that this simple space was transformed, this crowd of boisterous, irreverent teenagers, with just a few tea lights and some unspoken promise that we held together, it was as if the ordinary were held suspended. When worship concluded, the chalice would remain lit, and the worship space open for anyone who wanted to linger. I was usually among those who hung back, chin propped up on elbows, gazing at the flame, beholding the chalice and whatever magic we had just performed. Having grown up UU in the early 2000s, it's difficult for me to imagine walking into a UU congregation and not seeing a chalice. Just as it's difficult for me to imagine a time when Unitarian Universalism didn't exist as one unified identity. But both of these are pretty recent innovations. My dad, when I was first preparing for this service, he dug out for me this Unitarian Universalist hymnal titled Hymns for the Celebration of Life. It was published in 1964, just 3 years after the Unitarians and the Universalists got together. This 1964 hymnal includes 12 selected openings intended to be read in unison, much like how you read your chalice lighting. But it didn't have a section on chalice lightings like our hymnals do today. And that's because in 1964, nobody was lighting chalices. Chalice lighting and extinguishing as a ritual to frame UU services only gained widespread adoption in the early 80s. In fact, its adoption was so organic and unorganized, sounds kind of UU, that we have no clear record of who started it or how the practice went from a liturgical innovation to inextricable from UU identity. One theory that's promoted by UU historian and minister Susan Ritchie is that the chalice lighting actually began with our youth in our religious education classrooms. You see, not long after the merger of the Unitarians and the Universalists in 1961, the flaming chalice design was the established two-dimensional symbol of our faith. Popular Sunday school curricula of the late 70s included chalice crafts. So our children crafted many of our first chalices. And while there's no limit to the materials and creative techniques you could apply to crafting a chalice, I'm going to teach you a trick right now, okay? You have step 1, step 2, ta-da! And and then apply Elmer's glue, Mod Podge, glitter, magazine cuttings, markers, paint, whatever you have to dress it up and make it your own. I actually saw an example of this type of chalice right in your offices when I came in today. So now with real 3D chalices in hand, the next obvious step was to introduce a flame. And then youth Sundays, when the youth led the service for the whole congregation, could have served as the bridge between this new ritual taking off in Sunday school classrooms and becoming something that we used in our Sunday morning intergenerational worship. Another theory suggested by UU ministers Sherry Woodbury and Dan Harper suggests that the experimental Charles Street Universalist meeting house could have been the originator of chalice lighting. Their minister, the innovative Reverend Kenneth Patton, described features unique to the meeting house in the 1950s. Reverend Patton writes, quote, "On the bookcase is a lamp made from Greek and Roman design, which is a symbol of light, life, wisdom, the hearth, the home, and aspiration. The lamp is lighted at the beginning of the service and snuffed at the close," end quote. In any case, regardless of who started it, the fact that we have no record of how the practice of chalice lighting spread tells us that the ritual was popularized and adopted by congregations in an organic way. It means that the innovation of chalice lighting was contagious. And it was contagious, I think, because it filled a commonly felt gap. It answered a common problem. You see, only in 1961 had the U's and the U's come together to form this new denomination, but even before the merger, both denominations were in a state of reinvention. Having outgrown their namesake Christian theologies, Unitarians and Universalists by the mid-20th century were no longer a subgenre of Christianity, but something new. We needed a new common ritual for our theologically diverse identity. There was also maybe a commonly felt need for more spiritual sensory elements of worship, the types of experiences that UU Youth invented when we got together and that I experienced. Unitarian and Universalist worship placed emphasis on the sermon, words, and the world of ideas, but we didn't have rituals yet for our new theology. I'm wondering, does your congregation practice the flower celebration or flower communion, flower ceremony? Okay. So you probably have heard of Norbert Chopek, creator of the flower celebration. Chopek invented the flower celebration himself, he says, because of a commonly felt need, a spiritual need in his community. Members of his congregation would express that they were looking for something spiritual. And so the flower celebration was his response to that, wanting to honor the diversity of his community. Similarly, chalice lighting was a uniquely UU liturgy and response that resonated. So by the turn of the century, chalice lighting had secured its place in nearly every UU congregation. The two-dimensional paper symbol of the flaming chalice had gone up in flames, so to speak, and the symbolic image had become a living, dancing, elemental performed tradition. But how did we end up with the two-dimensional symbol in the first place? Before the flaming chalice was something that we acted out in services, the original pen and ink flaming chalice was itself born out of service and action. I'm going to ask you to return with me in history to the year 1939 and some of the characters that we met in the children's story. In 1939, the Nazis had risen to power, creating a refugee crisis in the still free and democratic Czechoslovakia, and the world was on the brink of war. It was in this context that Martha and Wait Still Sharp, who we met earlier, took up the charge of the American Unitarian Association to run the newly established Commission for Service in Czechoslovakia. The Sharps were the 18th minister and wife couple to be approached with this request, and the first to say yes. In February of 1939, the couple set sail, leaving their young son and daughter in the care of friends. The American Unitarian Association was galvanized to get involved in refugee relief in Europe, in large part thanks to our friend Norbert Čapek, inventor of the flower celebration. Čapek, born in the small town in the south of Bohemia in 1870, had left the Catholic Church of his youth at age 18 to become a Baptist minister. But as a free thinker, Čapek was soon taking heat for his ideas on politics and religion, and in 1914 became a refugee in the US, where he settled in New Jersey, where I grew up. During his time in New Jersey, Čapek was widowed and remarried, left the Baptist faith, and began attending a Unitarian congregation. Čapek and his second wife, Maya, a fellow Czech expat, decided eventually to return to their homeland and to establish a Unitarian church there. Well, the couple's new liberal religious fellowship, as they call it, grew rapidly. And by 1938, the year that Sudetenland was sacrificed to Germany in an ill-fated attempt at appeasement, the Czech Unitarian Fellowship had grown to 3,500 members, our largest Unitarian congregation at the time. And of course, many people had personal ties and relationships with the couple since they had attended the congregation in New Jersey and been active members there. So now, personal ties to Prague for Unitarians made the foreign crisis impossible to ignore. The American Unitarian Association raised $41,000 for relief efforts, which is about $1 million in today's money, and dispatched Martha and Waitstill Sharp. First arriving in Prague, the Sharp couple, were met by Norbert Čapek at the train station. And during their year in Prague, they both attended services at Unitaria. In addition to allocating relief funds to feed and house refugees, evacuating Jewish and anti-Nazi intellectuals quickly became a top priority for the couple. In March of 1939, 1 month after Martha and Waitstill's arrival, the German occupation of Czechoslovakia began. Martha and Waitstill worked to secure foreign job placements and exit visas for individuals whose political records and democratic ideas put a target on their backs. Martha took the lead on direct rescue efforts, while Waitstill undertook a high-risk and highly illegal currency exchange operation to fund their efforts. On August 15th, Martha fled Prague, having received a tip from a friend, August 15th of that same year. And not a day too soon, the Gestapo came knocking the following day to arrest her. As Martha and Waitstill crossed the Atlantic homeward bound after their first mission, Germany invaded Poland. Norbert Čapek was invited to return with them. Thanks to his connections, he would have been able to secure a visa in the US, unlike most of his congregation and most refugees at that moment. But he chose to remain with his congregation. He would be arrested 2 years later and die in a concentration camp. Before his death, Čapek held a flower celebration with fellow prisoners. And I think especially this day and age, I think of the acts of fellowship and resistance that must be happening in contemporary concentration camps on US soil. This is a prayer that Čapek wrote not long before his death. It is worthwhile to live and fight courageously for sacred ideals. O blow ye evil winds into my body's fire, my soul you'll never unravel. Even though disappointed 1,000 times or fallen in the fight and everything would worthless seem, I have lived amidst eternity. Be grateful, my soul. My life was worth living. Fast forward to November of 1939. The Unitarian Service Committee was formally established, and the Sharps were asked to again lead its field operations in Europe. This time, the Sharps set up their office in Lisbon, Portugal. And in September, Reverend Charles Joy joined the Sharps in the Lisbon office. It was Joy who took over direction of the office when the Sharps returned to the States, and Joy who was leading the mission there at the time that the Chalice symbol was commissioned. Paperwork then, as it is now, was a common impediment to border crossing. An important function of the Unitarian Service Committee quickly became assisting refugees in securing required documents from various agencies so that they could flee to safety. Joy decided to go one step further and to begin issuing papers themselves. Joy reported to Boston in one of his reports, quote, "It may amuse you a bit to know that we are now issuing navicerts to pass emigrants to the New World through the British blockade. We are certifying that they are politically safe and sound," end quote. So the Unitarian Service Committee needed a good-looking seal to give their papers that air of credibility. And here enters our flaming chalice. This seal was designed by Hans Deutsch, himself an Austrian refugee who had been living in Paris before the invasion. Deutsch, an artist and musician, had been publishing political cartoons critical of Hitler prior to Nazi invasion of Paris. Deutsch was himself a secular atheist, although he came to admire the work of his Unitarian co-conspirators. In the words of Hans Deutsch, quote, reflecting on Unitarianism, "If your kind of life is a profession of your faith, then religion ceasing to be magic and mysticism becomes active, really useful social work, to which even a godless fellow like myself can say wholeheartedly, yes." We don't have a record of Deutsch's interpretation of his own design, but we do have this description from Charles Joy in a report to Boston. Joy writes, "It represents, as you see, a chalice with a flame, the kind of chalice which the Greeks and the Romans put on their altars. The holy oil burning in it is a symbol of helpfulness and sacrifice. In ancient and medieval art, this chalice is frequently found, and the design itself, modernized and stylized though it is, reminds one of the signs seen on old monastic manuscripts. This was in the mind of the artist. The fact, however, that it remotely suggests a cross was not in his mind, but to me also has its merit. We do not limit our work to the Christians. Indeed, at the present moment, our work is 9/10 for the Jews, yet we do stem from the Christian tradition, and the cross does symbolize Christianity and its central theme of sacrificial love," end quote. Now, Joy, understanding committee politics, was careful to defer to the committee in Boston and their authority, assuring them that the symbol was only temporary, waiting for their approval. Nevertheless, Joy adds, "Personally, I like it very much. It is simple, chaste, and distinctive. I think it might well become a sign of our work everywhere." The flaming chalice did indeed become a sign of our work everywhere, adopted first by the Unitarian Service Committee, then by the larger Unitarian denomination, and eventually incorporated into our Unitarian Universalist chalices, interpreted by many artists everywhere. Our chalice, the symbol of our faith, has always been, first and foremost, about action and about service. It is a living symbol for a living tradition, born not out of lofty creeds or immutable ideals, but out of concrete necessity. Designed not by a prominent theologian or a prestigious committee, but by an anti-Hitler cartoonist, a self-proclaimed godless fellow, sketched in spare moments amidst his work aiding fellow refugees. The thing about lighting our chalice is it's not one and done. Ours is not an eternal flame. Our faith is not confessed, but recommitted to, acted out as best we can, again and again. Listen, I do love a good metaphor, and the chalice is brimming with them. But what I most often need from my UU community is that persistent challenge to live my faith with my body, with my time, with my choices. Action precedes theology in this church, meaning we discover what we believe in the moment that we paint our protest signs, that we pluck a weed flower from the prison yard dirt, that we open our mouths to sing. As the threat of fascism rises in our own country, and as 21st century concentration camps are erected and inhabited on US soil, in the Everglades, Florida, in my home state of New Jersey, in Delaney Hall, we are called to resist in a million difficult and beautiful ways. Whatever it is we do with this moment, that is what our chalice means.
Please rise now in body or in spirit and join us in our closing words. As we extinguish our chalice, I invite you to join me now in saying our community blessing with these words of David Bumba, or whatever. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity which makes us one and binds us forever together. The sight of time, death, and the space between the stars, we pause now in silent witness to that unity. Now that we have all gathered together in this welcoming and inclusive spiritual home, let's go out into the world inspired to share our values.